The mic is working at least. And is this at a good? Oh, I need to change this to that. But that shouldn't affect anything. Yep, that's good. Am I a good level? It looks like I am. Yep, that's good. Okay, cool. You can hear me. Okay, we're back again. I've got my hat, my Pizza Planet hat, one of my favorite hats. I have a non-alcoholic Sunbeam Pills, German hops, German malt, as a refreshment from, where is this from? Illinois. Interesting. Last time, our research was pretty superficial, I feel like. So I'm going to try to, be a little more focused this time around. I do want to watch through those documentaries because I feel like the scary stuff you can kind of just like walk through. And I've gotten like a good number. Like obviously there's the whole abandoned town aspect. I feel like, I could start by watching there's a video that kind of breaks down the rumors versus the other stuff. So we could start there maybe. Not this guy. This guy's funny. But here we go. This guy.
Perhaps the most infamous, supposedly supernatural location in Ohio is a spot that is now buried alongside some small towns south of Cleveland, as well as within the modern-day Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Back then, the area was named Boston, Ohio, and also included parts of some communities named Sagamore Hills, Boston.
I'm going to check the spelling on this. I just want to start getting information down. Sagamore, just 1-0. It's Summit County. I'm not going to do as well. I'm just going to do Boston, Sagamore Hills.
Township, and northward parts of some communities named Sagamore Hills, Boston Township, and Northfield Center Township. These communities still exist, by the way, but with portions of them
Center?
Named Sagamore Hills, Boston Township, and Northfield Center Township. These communities still exist, by the way, but with portions of them, in Boston's case, large portions, that were abducted, so to speak, by the US government for purposes that, at the time, were poorly understood. Following this, speculation has only grown that the US government, in their abduction of what is now known as Helltown, was trying to keep information from getting to the general public, some of which is speculated by many to have been supernatural, dangerous, or perhaps even satanic in nature. This is the story of Helltown. To give you some history for this place, Boston, Ohio, it was settled in 1806 as the first settled village in Summit County, Ohio, and the village itself was built in the 1820s. The area began to become more flushly populated, eventually due to the construction of the Ohio and Erie Canal, and soon after this, the area became economically viable because of the abundance of mills in the region, with a prominent sawmill in particular built in 1821, leading to the city being named Boston Mills. All was generally well and good, and the little town existed, if not prospered, mostly until the 1960s, when a movement started that would turn Boston on its head. In short, the destruction of natural areas was going too far in the minds of many Americans, and preservation was becoming a high priority for them. I can't entirely blame them. I love our outdoor settings, and I want the green space we have today to be preserved. That being said, legislation signed by President Ford in 1974 may have gone a little too far, allowing the National Park Service to purchase land to create national parks.
I'm going to add that as a footnote. Legislation. Outside the date, 1974 legislation. Allegedly added authority, or let's say gave NPS, which is National Park Service, authority to use eminent domain to acquire land from private citizens with little recourse on their part. I need to look into this because I don't know if there was already a bunch of other stuff that had happened in the years previously, if this is a different piece of legislation that set aside than the one that set aside Cuyahoga specifically. But I know what came out of this era was a lot of worry about the government just coming in and buying up a bunch of land against people's will. Essentially, the government using public interest as a excuse to not care about their right to property. And of course, I think there's going to be people who are very heavily leaning on either side, especially the side against the government, because obviously it's a scary idea to just be like, the government could just take my land whenever. My gut tells me it's a little more complicated than that, but maybe in this case, there was stuff where it was just flagrant. I also have a link here. Where is it? It's the Ford Library Museum, actually. It's a compilation of documents just about the process legislatively of setting aside Cuyahoga Valley, which at that point was already, this act just established it as a NRA, a National Recreational Area. $34 million aside to do that. A lot of that money was meant to be given to families because the whole process of eminent domain is essentially the government using a judge to set an amount that the government should pay the private citizen if they voluntarily want to leave. And ideally, there's also a way for those citizens to remain living there in most cases and be able to just integrate into the park around them. You know, maybe cut the borders of the park so that they can still keep a majority of their property, if possible. In this case, I don't think that was done well, or at least based on some sources I've seen. But these documents actually kind of go through. It's just a bunch of his correspondence and different senators writing about HR 7077. Blah, blah, blah. Dear Mr. President, the Senate passed this bill. This bill has already been passed in the House in the same form. I would like to express to you my strongest possible support for this measure and urge you to your signature be affixed to the bill signifying your approval. I'm attaching here to a copy of pages S21167, I guess just 2 pages on the congressional record, in which the character of the proposed park and the progress already made with regard to it is discussed. The legislation contains an authorization for $40 million for which no appropriation has yet been provided. The measure had strong bipartisan support and will constitute the only federal establishment of this kind in the entire state of Ohio. And there's a bunch of discourse back and forth even surrounding this that we'll get into, where you can see different sides, with one side basically saying it's a national park, why not? It'll be the first one in Ohio. This is a good piece of land, it makes sense. And the other side essentially arguing that it's not significant enough to warrant the federal government's involvement, that this is not a site that is like Yellowstone, like Yosemite, where there's significant natural landmarks. It's just kind of like a nice piece of nature that should be preserved, but maybe not by the federal government specifically. Here we have more correspondence. And you can see in this one, I believe, the Office of Management and Budget bringing up these concerns. They disapprove of this bill, as well as the Department of Interior, they talk about how The administration opposed this legislation in reporting to the Congress on the basis that while the river valley can serve northeastern Ohio adequately as a regional park, more set apart by the state government, it simply does not qualify as a component of the NPS, the National Park System. They talk about how the process, how the and this is, I think, interesting as well, that I think Ohio state government, the Bureau of Outdoor Recreation, in cooperation with state and local park authorities, have already been in the process of acquiring approximately 6,212 acres of Cuyahoga Valley for outdoor recreation and open space purposes. When completed, this joint federal, state, local project envisions the acquisition of 14,500 acres at the price of $35 million, 35 and a half about, half of which will be provided by the federal government. Which, you know here that this is actually very close to the same amount that this bill wanted to set aside for fully on the payroll of the federal government. So I think the idea is they're saying this process is literally already happening. It's just that it's coordinated between the federal government, which is providing half the funding, and providing some resources to local and state governments. But it's the state and local governments that are taking point on actually the boots on the ground process, which I think is a valid point given what we see happens. The majority of responsibility for providing such resources resides with the state and local authorities. There's a serious question as to whether this program can hope to keep ahead of the pressures for development of the area. So a bunch of different arguments, I feel like, on both sides. Establishment of a federal area offers the possibility of a coordinated program, which is, I think, the argument for the pro side of this bill, that there was just a lot of development happening in this area, as we'll talk about in a minute. The Cuyahoga River further up towards Cleveland actually got caught on fire a few years before this, I think in 1969, and that was because of the chemicals that different companies and factories in the area were dumping into the water, which kind of was one of the big things that was a catalyst for this bill eventually being made. I think the guy who wrote it or co-sponsored it ran a campaign for his election, based on this initiative, among other things. Arguments for a veto. The administration's policies for the federal government to provide assistance and guidance to states in the development of outdoor recreation resources. The Cuyahoga Valley possesses no qualities which qualify it for an inclusion in the national park system. The bill authorizes the Secretary of Interior to provide police and fire services, or if the locals continue to provide them, the Secretary will provide reimbursement. Currently, in our federal parks area, the locals provide police services without reimbursement. A lot of their arguments, I think, end up being financial, that this doesn't justify us being involved financially when we could just have the state fund it and give the thumbs up, or at least the state and local governments fund more of it. Secretary Morton states the bill is just the first of other urban parks which Congress will serve up next year. The Secretary feels that if this bill is signed, the precedent will clearly be set for an urban recreation area near every large city, which, again, I think their concern here is specifically more financial. But within this is this idea, again, of, are we going to have the national government come into an area that they're not necessarily locally familiar with, like local authorities and state authorities would be, and then play by their rules, as opposed to trying to tailor something more specifically to the people, the local residents' needs. And then, this is just more stuff. A lot of it just, these documents are just copies of each other, different repeats. Some people are unopposed, some people are. Senator Taft is someone who will come up a bunch, as well as Steinberger or something like that. Steinberger. There's a guy who is in a documentary we're going to watch, who's a senator who very much is in favor of this. I think he's the guy who actually co-sponsored the bill and ran his election partly on it. This is a copy of the bill itself, or a report about it, I believe, by the Committee of the whole House of the State of the Union. Committee of Interior and Insular Affairs. What does the Committee of the Interior handle? Interior Environment Committee of the Interior. Department of the Interior? Is that what it said? Wasn't it a committee? Committee of Interior and Insular Affairs. Is this even the U.S.? Yeah, U.S. Department of Interior. The Assistant Secretary carry out the Secretary's responsibility for the U.S. territories. Oh, is that Insular Affairs? Is Interior just like domestic affairs then? Is that what we're kind of... Department of Interior manages and protects and manages, the nation's natural resources and cultural heritage, provides scientific and other information about those resources, and honors its trust responsibilities for special commitments to American Indians, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians, and affiliated island communities. So it sounds very much like a preservation of like natural areas as they are currently now. I'm going to make this a little bigger. Make me a little bigger. Right there. Bring this up just a little bit. Perfect. Good to know. So those are documents we can look at later, but I want to keep going through this and just start getting like points down.
This sounds reasonable on the surface until you realize that it actually gave them the right of eminent domain. Essentially, the right to name a price on the property and the land of private owners. They'd basically come in and say, this is the price we're giving you, and we're taking this land from you, and now we own it. And this was used to basically clear the way for national parks. There's no negotiation here, and they name the price, and you happily accept it or suck it up and relocate. Either way, you're out of there. This is exactly what or suck it up and relocate. There's no negotiation here, and they name the price, and you happily accept it or suck it up and relocate. Either way, you're out of there. This is exactly what happened to the townships that were essentially absorbed by the Cuyahoga Valley National.
Which a lot of this is already gone. A lot of these houses and buildings that were abandoned or forced to be abandoned by the federal government. This is where Helltown comes from, essentially. First of all, is these buildings being abandoned and just sitting in the woods as they become overgrown and spooky. But also, in 2016, the federal government finally got around to tearing down a majority of the buildings up in the Boston area, which is where like that Main Street, the road to the end of the world, or the road to nowhere, that's where all that stuff was and
park.
It's caused
Basically,
by this.
all of a sudden, an entire community became a ghost town, leaving behind a perfectly normal-looking community overnight. And therefore, it's no wonder that folks found the place eerie. This absorption of many properties wasn't painless either. It was downright kind of cruel.
I just want to see what this sounds like. That's where all
happened to the townships that were essentially absorbed by the Cuyahoga, perfectly normal-looking community overnight. And therefore,
okay, that's good.
And eventually was found to be illegal. The following is a brief saga demonstrating the ruthlessness with which people's homes were swept out from under them. This sort of all started...
This guy's important. Bird cell. Which when you say it, it just kind of sounds like incel, which is funny. Not that he was a bad guy necessarily, but at least the documentaries that were made around the time don't present him in a positive light. And I know there was an article I found yesterday that maybe gave context to that, but he was the head of the National Park Service, and I believe he was very insistent, at least from the way the documentary presents it, on getting people out of their homes, as opposed to trying to actually work with them.
National Parks Superintendent William Birdsell introduced himself in 1974. At first, he seemed like a friendly National Parks representative, but he would quickly become the townspeople's worst enemy, prioritizing the expansion of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park above all else, and going about his job without a bit of flexibility. William informed many of the townspeople they just needed to leave their homes rather quickly, and despite the fact that this was done in a manner that many portrayed as far too fast, he, I quote, didn't believe this was arbitrary, and thought his plans were well thought out, and thought that while this was in conflict with many individuals, he still believed that it was within their mandate and what they were charged to do. Perhaps he poured salt on the wound when later representatives for the National Park Service made it clear that this land was purchased for the purpose of recreation and even picnic areas. Certainly nothing do or die, so to speak. As this injustice to the locals began to take shape, they made it clear that they felt there was never any intent of protecting a community in the park.
There's never any intent to protect a community. We try to find adaptive use of any of the structures we can if there's an administrative need, but we don't project any use for that at the present time. It'll be simply obliterated and become public use area along the river there.
And the locals felt like they had lost a substantial amount of trust in a government which was literally pulling their livelihoods and sometimes properties that had been owned by their families for generations right out from under them without saying it in this manner. A few of the blatant, disrespectful acts towards locals included them taking someone's house and admitting they were going to make it a visitor center.
Needs have changed. The first one was to put in a horse trail that ran through here down there. Now you can see, it would be an impossibility to put a horse trail down there. Well, once I pointed that out to them, all of a sudden it changed.
This
from
guy's
that
also
to
big.
when we took.
This guy, at least from the documentary I watched, which we'll watch together in a minute, is kind of based, honestly. He's a real G. He's a real hero. He is a guy who lives there and then eventually like does a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington moment and like is advocating.
He
for
wanted
his
to bulldoze
community
it because he wanted to preserve
in a way
the
that I
open
just
space.
feel like you don't
He
see
wanted
much
to add
anymore.
another couple of acres to
Very
the
classically
30,000
American.
acres of open space that they already had. The latest, and I think this just happened within the last month, or the last couple of months anyhow, that they now want to put it into some sort of a visitor center because they think it's so nice. They want to take my house and make it a visitor center.
And also they seized the land of one farmer, who was told that because they didn't produce enough volume, because they weren't a big-time farmer, their farm was considered a hobby rather than a business.
Two young fellows come out and said, "You're not a big-time farmer," so he says it's classified as a hobby. He said, "Well, that's the way it is. We want your property, and I don't like it."
Generally speaking, the draconian policy throughout this ordeal was that there was no negotiation to be done. Their property was on a list, so their home was being bought. End of story. A higher-up said that this was the way it was going to be, with a Department of the Interior employee even remarking on public television at one point, "As far as I see it, my personal interest and everyone else's personal interest that lives in this valley is secondary to the public interest."
And as far as I'm concerned, my personal interest and everyone else's personal interest that lives in this valley is secondary to the public interest.
This is the guy. Sorry, I was not focused.
Interest and everyone else's personal interest that lives in this valley is secondary to the public interest.
And as far
of the interior. End of story. A higher-up said that this was the way it was going to be.
We want your property, and
Policy throughout this ordeal was that there was no negotiation to be done. Their property was on a list, so their home was being bought. End of story. A higher-up said that this was the way it was going to be, with a Department of the Interior employee even remarking on public television at one point, "As far as I see it, my personal interest and everyone else's personal interest that lives in this valley is secondary to the public interest."
and as far as I'm concerned, my personal interest and everyone else's personal interest that
This is not an employee, I don't think. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he is the senator. What is his name? Seinberg? Ohio senator. It's something like Cuyahoga. It's everywhere around like his I think he's passed away, and I think it's all over like his like memorial page, just how he was the guy who was very much, not like in a bad way, but just very much advocating for this. Oh no, we got layoffs. No. Current events, always current. He's in here. Seberling, John Seberling, which I believe if you go down, I think he was a senator. Isn't that what that says up here? Congressman, yeah. Which if you look this up, it's the same guy. Like that's him, right? I'm pretty sure the documentary, which we'll watch in a minute,
lives in this valley is secondary to the public interest.
After the properties were seized, those who wouldn't comply had no choice but to leave, as the military was sent in to clear out the homes of residents who wouldn't leave when asked, and then afterwards they boarded up these homes. They even began to inventory the homes and belongings left behind. These military representatives were armed with rifles and also fully armored, something that locals thought to be strange and unnecessarily threatening, since they weren't really going into a combat zone. The rebuttal to this was that there were some aggressive folks that were refusing to leave their homes, so rifles were a security measure. But still, the locals found this to be really unsettling. Once cleared, the neighborhoods were littered with no trespassing signs and were patrolled regularly by armed men. According to the superintendent, the same William Birdsell from earlier on the matter, we tried to find adaptive use of any of these structures we could if there were any administrative needs. Otherwise, structures were obliterated to make way for natural areas. And by obliterated, he meant literally. In 1976, almost the entire community was burnt to the ground. This included 3 townships and about 32 acres of property. The superintendent did say he thought this was very satisfying, that he felt he was preserving something for people for all time.
It's very satisfying to me to know that I'm preserving something for people for all time.
The fallout, however, had clearly reached folks throughout the government. And while I never cheer for anyone's demise, the ending of Birdsell's role in the story is somewhat poetic. As he was reassigned shortly after this ordeal concluded, but in 1980, it's said that as he was cleaning out his desk, mid-role transition, he actually had a heart attack and passed away.
Yeah, I know this. Yeah, it's the documentary shows, which is just crazy. They like have the interview with him, and then they're like, but his next assignment would not come to be because he would be transitioning roles and literally like cleaning off his desk and like die from a heart attack, and then it just cuts to his literal grave, which is crazy. Oh, I guess he was superintendent over Cuyahoga.
Following this, things were sort of looking up for the townsfolk. I mean, other than their homes being taken away from them and some of them literally torched. There was at least a tidbit of justice. Lawyers eventually found that the land taken from them was not legally obtained, and this brought the expansion of the national park to a halt.
I'm so bad at typing.
But the damage to the community had already been done. Though the government was ordered to sell this land back to the locals, most of it had already been torn down or torched. And even if someone had bought their land back, there wouldn't be anything to return to in most cases. With a story like this hovering above Helltown, perhaps it really was hell after all. Now, if you scour YouTube for videos on Helltown, you're going to find a lot of good videos, kind of saying what I'm saying, but also you're going to find a lot of fantastical accounts by ghost hunters prowling the decrepit neighborhoods and getting incredible EVPs as well. You're also going to find...
this is the GOAT video because he tells the true story, and then he goes through each of like the main like spooky things, and they can add stuff here.
Tales about government cover-ups, trees moving in Helltown Cemetery, cryptids and mutants. You'd probably think this was the most haunted or horrifying place in the state before researching it, and frankly I thought this was just going to be the case, but after reading about it, I think it's scary, but not in a supernatural way. Regardless, with all of this as a backdrop, here are a few of the urban legends surrounding Helltown. Our first rumor is that the government was involved in the spill of hazardous materials, and that this spill could have harmed the residents, and this is why they were forcibly removed. This rumor feeds the urban legend that mutants roam in the woods of Cuyahoga Valley and the national park, but in reality there was no spill that was ever identified in the area, and this was likely an urban legend formed to just explain why suddenly the government was trying to get all these people out of this region. Second, the cemetery in Boston Mills contains a bunch of graves of children, and the rumors say that
Oh shit. What was that? My stream just glitched majorly. I don't know what that was. Let's see if that happens again. Cemetery. Oh gosh. So bad. How do you spell cemetery? Oh, it's just 3 E's. That's stupid.
These children's lives ended in a bus accident related to their relocation, and that the government covered this up by burying them here. Now, frankly, this urban legend is a little bit of a cop-out. As sad as it is, children are not impervious to their mortality, and any cemetery will probably contain the grave of a child. This legend was likely started to try and explain why there was a school bus in Helltown. There's also reports that this bus belonged to a criminal that went after these children and took care of them himself, putting them in the graves. And that on the right night, you can actually see the glowing ghostly silhouettes of children inside of the bus. But let's be clear, the truth of this bus isn't dastardly at all. Rather, in 1974, a family actually just bought this bus to live in while their house was being renovated. Going go to these was a cemetery cop-out by burying them here. Now, frankly, this urban legend is a little bit of a cop-out. As sad as it is, children are not impervious to their mortality, and any cemetery will probably contain the grave of a child. This legend was likely started to try and explain why there was a school bus in Helltown. There's also reports that this bus belonged to a criminal that went after these children and took care of them himself, putting them in the graves. And that on the right night, you can actually see the glowing ghostly silhouettes of children inside of the bus. But let's be clear, the truth of this bus isn't dastardly at all. Rather, in 1974, a family actually just bought this bus to live in while their house was being renovated. When the government robbed the family of their property, they just happened to leave the bus behind. Nowadays, the bus is gone, but it remains a nuisance because apparently a lot of people roam through the area and also in the woods looking for this bus. Third, there's an urban legend about an abandoned house in the woods of Helltown that mysteriously has lights on in the upstairs windows. And this actually isn't even an urban legend. There's just a house that is actually a hostel for young people, and it keeps its lights on because it accepts guests 24 hours a day.
Oh, wait a minute. Or is it Apple Maps? Boston Heights. We're over here. Boston. Right here. Hostelling, Stanford, Boston, Ohio. There's the Stanford house itself, but that's like very official looking. Is there another one? Does this mention... This just mentions these two. Red Lock. Oh shit. Hmm. The Stanford Trail's still fine, it looks like, according to this. The towpath. I don't know what the towpath is. I know it's this one, but then they don't mention. They mention the Brandywine one and the other one. But we mainly want to go... There's the Brandywine Falls Trailhead. Brandywine Gorge. So maybe this one here is messed up. Worst come to worst, we'll just park down here and just walk up here as far as we can. Or we can get up here and then park here. Which they don't say the Stanford one is closed. Oh. Man, it's going to be dangerous. Oh, gosh. Ow. But anyway.
It's not even in the woods. It's just got a long driveway. Fourth, there are legends that the churches in Boston Mills are run by evil Satanists, and that the proof of this activity is the fact that folks often see candles, how dastardly, lit inside, and an upside-down cross. Now, at least these claims are true. I mean, there are churches. I've by no means been to these churches, but I've certainly been to churches with candles lit inside, and this wasn't nefarious, this was just a Christmas Eve celebration. Additionally, seemingly upside-down crosses are kind of common in Gothic Revival-style architecture, so I think that might just be the case here. Also, if these were secret cults rather than churches, I probably wouldn't have been able to go online and click on these churches on Google Maps and find their phone numbers. That probably would hurt their secrecy, so I'm going to rule this one out too.
That's what they want you to think.
Fifth, folks claim that there are many fatal car crashes on some of the roads in the national park, in particular Stanford Road, which is a twisty road with a steep incline, and they say that this is due to ghostly or cult activity or maybe even the government. And, well, there are indeed a lot of fatal crashes on this road, and that's because it's a twisty road with a steep incline. Case closed. Sixth, there's a building that many conflate as two buildings that's said to have been both a slaughterhouse, of which one never existed in Boston Township, and a funeral home, which was, this building also wasn't a funeral home. So, sure, maybe this building is haunted, but not in a way that fits this legend that goes around the building. Rather, the single building with these two labels was actually just part of an old duplex, and this place in particular was sold back into private ownership. It's still in operation, and people just live there. Seventh, it's said that local authorities actually will stop people and warn passerbys to keep moving through Boston. True that they do have a move-along rule in Boston Township. It's generally just to keep people from loitering and trespassing on private property because of all of the urban legends surrounding the area, not any. Anything nefarious. So, I'm sorry if this video was a bit of a buzzkill, if you were expecting an in-depth look into a haunted place, but in my eyes, Helltown is a story about a hell that humans created, not otherworldly beings.
That's my
I can't imagine having sunk my entire life into purchasing a property and building a family in a house or on a plot of land, or even having the land that belonged to my grandparents, something very sentimental to me, only for the government to come and tell me, "Too bad, so sad, get out of here." It would just break my heart, and it broke my heart to hear the accounts of those that lost everything during this whole ordeal. So that's the story of Helltown. Personally, the next time I drive through the Cuyahoga Valley, I'll be looking at it a lot differently than I used to. Perhaps my visit to the national park will be less content, knowing some of the land I'm standing on was probably procured in an unethical manner. And perhaps I'll be more grateful for the sacrifice that many clearly made to help this national park exist. So, kind of a weird way to end this one, but I guess whether this story made you sad, angry, or even a little bit scared yourself, don't you ever forget, it's always story time.
True. T story time. Check him out. Good video. Oh, he even has the credits. Oh, he's just crediting the photos. A lot of these are just these are all, I think, just photos. And even this, I was wondering, I was like, are these photos of things? But like all these are just like more Creative Commons photos, which is fine. Very, very true. That's from like Ukraine or whatever. Is this a... Okay, cool. I just want to make sure this wasn't like an actual photo of like the bus. Let's see what the comments are saying. I really like that you were super honest and didn't sensationalize the story for views. True. As a lifelong resident of the area, I appreciate a factual account of the Helltown story. In Furnace Run, near the Everett Road Bridge, there's a lot of snakes in the creek bed when it turns cold. I've hiked, rode my bike, and rode horses down there a lot in the last 48 years. No cryptids, no witches, no ghosts. True. highlights how American folklore often isn't quite historical, but there's usually some truth and sincerity behind it. True. I believe there's some legends that are allegorical commentary on people's experiences during the whole eminent domain ordeal. Many of the structures are still very old, and there's plenty of rich history and natural beauty to be found there. Cool. Billiam hipster trash. True. This guy has a good video about the Helltown documentary. Documentary that Travel Channel did, which is, you know, it's for entertainment, but it's weird that they just kind of present it without being like, yeah, this isn't real. This is just fictional. All these pictures, man. That's a real picture, at least. Satanic Panic. Ben Stiller. In Condemnation is a very like old style one, and I'm pretty sure this is more from the residents of Everett. They even kind of show, yeah, Everett, Ohio. So I might skip this one because it's genuinely
they would be paid for their property.
like just photos.
Would allow us would be, and if we didn't,
but an easement.
Bob and Natalie Volkanoff came to the valley in 1940.
Yeah, the whole idea, it's called in condemnation because if you refuse to pay the fee, or not pay the fee, accept the payment from the government and leave your property, you're held in condemnation, and then you have to go to court. And they sit there. What was that? To rent out some of the boarded up homes already acquired. The reason is to preserve the sense of community, which is funny. For all people...
Issues which are
This is the old one. And then this one was made into a Frontline episode.
Major funding for Frontline is provided.
Record, and it was selected as one of the
national park, the national record.
There's Birdsell, but I kind of want to watch this one because this one's more like the raw, uncut version. I had no idea of the controversy. True. Battle Beast. Anyway, I think I need to go. I need to go use the restroom real quick. So, do we have like royalty free? Ooh, this looks cool. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. My mic is working, and I have little snacks for my dog and a snack for me. Let me just make sure my sound's working. Okay, cool. Let's dig into this. Oh my gosh. I'm so bad at typing. I think this keyboard is a little tough. It's like one of those magnetic ones. It's very nice. It's just I'm not used to typing on it yet. I'm gonna speed it up a little bit. The music may sound a little weird, but
it's a death. It's the death of the community. Slow death of the community.
Congressman Seiberling has stated this publicly, and to me personally, there was never any intent to protect a community.
Certainly, our acquisition of properties was displacing people, creating hard feelings, some of which were justified, perhaps some of which weren't. I'm not going to make the value judgment now, but some hard calls had to be made.
It's a treasure that you've got, that you build up over the years as a kid. And as you grew up, my family grew up there. It's something that you just can't buy.
Burn on, big river, burn on. Now the Lord can make you tumble. The Lord can make you turn. The Lord can make you overflow. The Lord can make you burn. Burn on, big river.
I don't know if this music is copyright, so it looks like it is. So I'll just mute that.
In the summer of 1979, my brother and I came to the Cuyahoga Valley of northeastern Ohio to make a film. We planned to spend 1 year documenting the creation of a new kind of Eastern National Park. As it turned out, we stayed almost 4 years.
Damn.
Looking at a map, it's hard to imagine that a place like the Cuyahoga Valley is between the industrial cities of Akron and Cleveland. In fact, the valley is totally different from most of northern Ohio, with steep hills, waterfalls, and ravines. Someone said it's like a piece of New England dropped into the middle of industrial concrete and smokestacks. The valley is sparsely settled, and many of the people who do live there have been on the same land for generations.
I was born and raised on a farm, and when I was 9 years old, my dad was on a 280-acre farm. He caught his hired man sleeping out in the field instead of working, so he fired him. So I took over for him, and I've been at it ever since.
Well, my great-grandfather came from Java and went to Edinburgh, Scotland, and settled, and then they decided they'd come to America, I guess, so they came and settled up on Oak Hill. He went to school over on a little corner school. All the kids went there, and he wore kilts. He was the only one that wore kilts, and they laughed at him and all, but he wore them. I was born in the same house as my dad was, and grew up there. The road that we lived on, that was named after our family. It's just beautiful in the area. Just a different atmosphere than anywhere else in the world. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, you know, I happen to be lucky here today. I happen to be the oldest continuous resident of the Cuyahoga Valley present at the picnic. So I wound up winning myself some nice stationery, and being a strawberry festival, it had strawberries up in the corner.
Nice.
Fortunately, every governmental subdivision, village, and township within the valley in Summit County were pioneers in zoning for the protection of the valley. Protection from industry, commercialism, and multiple housing units. None were permitted.
What was the non-permitted?
Commercialism and multiple housing units. Commercialism of the valley. Protection from industry, commercialism, and multiple housing units. None were permitted.
We were living in Kent, in the city, and we wanted to get out in the country. So we started driving around and spent probably 2 years just driving around and saw this property. There was a small 4-room cabin. We got together and we worked out a land contract basis. We didn't have a lot of money. We added probably about 1,000 square feet and virtually had a new house by the time we were done. We started the remodeling and the addition in 1974, June of 74. It took me several years to do it because of limited funds and because I was doing it in my spare time after work and weekends and things like that. But in about early 1977, I'd had it pretty well along. So we submitted it to Architectural Record, and it was selected as one of the 20 outstanding homes in the country for 1977.
Nice. Work, buddy.
Kids used to swim in the quarry up here. I can remember that. They since made it a pool now that's safe to swim, but we didn't have it at that time.
Now, this is from the quarry.
Yeah,
that's a dinky they used to...
My dad used to run that at the quarry from one end to the other. He was an engineer. Well, there's just something here that you can't get anyplace else. There's something that any other town didn't have it. The friendliness, the people that were different. It was just something that belonged to you, something you wanted to keep, something you was proud of.
Natalie was a floral designer prior to our marriage and during the first part of our marriage. So after our first child was born, she was going to go back to work. My question to her was, who's going to take care of the baby? Her answer was, her mother. I said, well, you're the mother. You're to take care of the baby.
Nope.
So we had an ongoing discussion about this, as she's going back to work and who's going to take care of the baby. So one day coming back home from work, I had a bright inspiration. I asked her if she'd like to have her own business, and which was a flower business. She says yes. So immediately thereafter, I put up a building and hung a sign out, Natalie's Flower Shop. So that's what started out as Natalie's Florist.
Well, we were in the middle of nowhere. There was, first of all, there was farmland around us, and then after a while, there became pastures and cows.
So the business really started as a lark, not knowing that it was going to blossom and bloom into flourishing business.
Very few people know our last name, because my first name's Natalie, and they just think it's Natalie Florist. They just obviously, and they call my husband Mr. Natalie, which he doesn't like very much.
I'm Mr. Natalie.
Oh, he doesn't like that. Uh-oh. Hopefully dinner wasn't
One of my
cold.
primary reasons for wanting to move out here in the valley and raise a family here was because of the makeup of the community.
Here's my goat.
It was just a lot of different people
sir.
who
Look at his
all
hair.
seem to get along together.
Steen Sapir.
One of the things that sort of epitomizes the kind of person that was living here was when I moved here from Manhattan. I had a candle chandelier that I brought with me that came from Spain, and one of the spanners on it broke. And I was looking for somewhere to get it fixed. And I asked around, and they said, well, go see Burl Tonkin. He's the guy who fixes everything. So I went down to see Burl, and there was this guy in this beat-up old shop, and I showed him an example of what I needed, and he said, yep. He said, I think I can make that come back in about a week. So I came back about a week later, and sure enough, he'd made this spanner exactly like the one that I asked him to replace. And I said to him, well, how much do I owe you? And he looked at me and said, well, it'll be $2. And I couldn't believe it.
$2. Oh. Could not read what I said. They're showing how they like fix it. The thing here is you're dealing with a compressed video, showing a compressed video. Oh. Oh. I didn't know that.
The experiment of urban national parks began with the Golden Gate National Recreation Area in San Francisco and Gateway Recreation Area near New York City. These parks were created by using surplus Army land, vacant military installations, and abandoned coastal batteries, and merging them with city parks, state parks, and public beaches. The experiment of urban national parks began with the Golden Gate National Recreation Area in San Francisco and Gateway Recreation Area near New York City. These parks were created by using surplus Army
What
land.
am I pressing? Oh, I see. Sorry, I'm really distracted.
Gateway Recreation Area near New York City. These parks were created by using surplus Army land, vacant military installations, and abandoned coastal batteries, and merging them with city parks, state parks, and public beaches. The creation of these two parks started a trend, and late in 1970, Army land, vacant military installations, and
vacant military. Which just state and local parks, right?
Abandoned coastal batteries, and merging them with city parks, state parks, and public beaches. The creation of these two parks started a trend, and late in 1974, President Ford signed the act that designated the Cuyahoga Valley in Ohio as the next urban national park.
What did it say back here? It was something...
The experiment of urban national parks began with the Golden Gate National Recreation Area in San Francisco and Gateway Recreation Area near New York City. These parks were created by using surplus Army land, vacant military installations, and abandoned coastal batteries, and merging them with city parks, state parks, and public beaches.
That's what I just wanted to communicate.
The creation of these two parks started a trend, and late in 1974, President Ford signed the act that designated the Cuyahoga Valley in Ohio as the next urban national park.
Yep, 74.
This new park would include 32,000 acres along the winding Cuyahoga River as it flowed between Akron and Cleveland. 16,000 of those acres were already metropolitan parks, and they would be transferred to the National Park Service. The remaining acreage was mostly farmland. Only 2% of the land inside the park boundary was being used as private residential dwellings. Congressman John Seiberling, the father, used metropolitan parks, and they would be transferred to the National Park. 16,000 of those winding Cuyahoga River as it flowed between Akron and Cleveland. 16,000 of those acres were
I'm
already
going to slow this down a little bit so I can keep...
metropolitan parks, and they would be transferred to the National Park Service. The remaining acreage was mostly farmland. Only 2% of the land inside the park boundary was being used as private residential dwellings. Congressman John Seiberling, the father of the park, said, "Unlike most national parks, it would not be wholly federally owned, as most of it would be protected through scenic easements and local zoning. In planning the park, like most national parks, it would not be wholly federally owned, as most of it would be protected through scenic easements and local zoning. In planning the park, the people must be considered as a resource, as well as the trees and flowers and birds and waterfalls."
Well, each
In
one of
some
these
way.
parks is unique. For instance, we're breaking ground in that sense because both Gateway and Golden Gate National Recreation Areas were established around large blocks of already owned federal land. Whereas here there was absolutely no federal land within the authorized boundary when we started.
This is Happy Days Information Center, and it's located on Route 303 in Peninsula, Ohio. Right here we have a map of the National Park Service Cuyahoga Valley National Recreation Area. Recreation areas are set aside for recreational land use and also to preserve natural beauty and historic sites. When we look at the valley...
People don't talk like this anymore. You know, like they don't... In film stuff, I think people back then probably didn't have as much experience as most people nowadays have, like having a camera, just being like, I'm talking to a camera. So now it's... Here it was more like... It was very like rehearsed a lot of the time. Or they spoke in a way that I feel like was very like for television, which I kind of appreciate. That's what that Stein Sabir or whatever that guy's name is, Stein Sapir guy. I appreciate about the way he speaks.
You can see that it's 32,000 acres set aside. Right now, the only areas that are under Park Service operation are the 8 metro park areas. The rest
She's
of
like
the
reading a
acreage,
script,
the light green
but not.
section, marks private citizens' land that is being bought up slowly but surely, and then will lead to further development of picnicking areas and things of that nature.
So this was entirely different. It was therefore a more involved and major land acquisition program than those other 2 parks had had. And so, yes, we were breaking ground.
We had received a letter from the government saying that they wanted to acquire our property in fee, and that we would be receiving a call from the appraiser to set up a time for them to come out and appraise the property. And I specifically asked why, or who made the determination and for what reasons. The standard answer that I got was, your property is on my list. You know, that's the kind of answer that you get. There's some mysterious, you know, higher level person is making these decisions, and that they're not privy to the rationale. They just end up with a list and say, go buy this.
Now, for some strange reason, they need my house. Yet, right across the street, they've given that whole side of the street preservation easements and restrict its use to just residential family life.
Okay, I'm back. Just had to take that call. Let's keep going.
Which was, frankly, part of what the legislative history of the act said was supposed to happen, to preserve the community and preserve the homes and that people were living in here, but also to preserve the open space so that people didn't put up condominiums and tracks and things like that.
What do they want to do with your property? Any idea?
Well, the needs have changed. The first one was to put in a horse trail that ran through here down there. Now you can see, it would be an impossibility to put a horse trail down there. Well, once I pointed that out to them, all of a sudden it changed from that to when we took Bertzel's deposition, he wanted to bulldoze it because he wanted to preserve the open space. He wanted to add another couple of acres to the 30,000 acres of open space that they already had. The latest, and I think this just happened within the last month, or the last couple of months anyhow, that they now want to put it into some sort of a visitor center because they think it's so nice. They want to take my house and make it a visitor center.
He's on the east side of Oak Hill Road in an area that has been identified from the outset of planning as an area to be acquired in fee and developed as a public use area. Now, within the properties that we acquire outright, certain properties will be retained, certainly historic structures will be retained, and then we're keeping a few of them simply as what we call scene setters, to maintain the pastoral scene to help tell the story of the valley.
Well, just a lot of different people who all seem to get along together. One of the things that sort of epitomizes the...
And then we're keeping a few of them simply as what we call scene setters, to maintain the pastoral scene to help tell the story of the valley.
Well, when they first appraised it, there was two young fellows come out, and if we took an easement on it or a life's term on the property, they said we couldn't have only the garden spot in the house. We couldn't even use the barn.
I said, well, how do you expect me to carry on? Well, he said, you're not a big-time farmer, so he says it's classified as a hobby.
I said, well, that's the way it is. We want your property. And I said, well, I don't like it. I said, if we took an easement on it or a life's term on the property, they said we couldn't have only the garden spot in the house. We couldn't even use the barn.
I said, well, how do you expect me to carry on? Well, he said, you're not a big-time farmer, so he says it's classified as a hobby.
I said, well, that's the way it is. We want your property. And I said, well, I don't like it. I said, just forget about the whole thing. And he said, well, we'll buy it right outright.
Good afternoon, Natalie Forrest. Okay, go ahead.
Well, the flower shop itself is a commercial operation that was incompatible with the park being developed as a public use, and so that had to go. The house eventually be disposed of, as will the floral shop. We try to find adaptive use of any of the structures we can if there's an administrative need, but the size of that shop and its location, we don't project any use for that at the present time. It'll be simply obliterated and become public use area along the river there.
Obliterated is a
Well, I
crazy
really,
term.
Asked the lawyer, I said,
Crazy
well,
turn of
just ignore the
phrase.
sons of bitches. And he said, well, you can't do that. I said, why not?
Sons of bitches.
They'll send armed men in and take it away from you. And, well, that didn't worry me a great deal, except for Grandma, that would tear her all to pieces if I went that way. And so I decided to do the best I could and just get out. I take care of Grandma, and she'll have to go with me when I go. Well, she's going to go with me when
I'm going to go with him. He's all I got. My husband's dead.
Oh.
I've got no daughter.
My brother, he knew about this sort of operation from the Pennsylvania Water Gap because he was familiar with, he drove into that station over there and he's familiar with this type of operation that they do, and he was pretty well, I didn't quite believe it myself at first.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's a Delaware water gap.
I understand that these squatters moved into some of the summer cottages where the owners had been put out, And the United States Marshals came at 6 a.m. in the morning, which seems a curious time, and simply bulldozed the houses, and the squatters had to run out with whatever they could grab and get out of there.
Here is your reporter, Tom Powell. The Tox Island project will have a profound effect on life in northeastern Pennsylvania. Its recreational abundance will attract millions of visitors from the population complexes of New York and Philadelphia. Jim Mustard interviewed Park Superintendent Delphi.
What was his last
area
name?
We're looking at here, the gap itself is one of the long-range objectives for
They're not
scenic
like
preservation.
us. That's all I'm saying.
And Tox Island Dam across
That's all I'm
here.
saying. That's all I'm saying.
And this area was to
That's all I'm
be
saying.
taken by the park. Well, there were farms and there were summer cottages that some of them people had built themselves, and large cornfields. It was a very fertile piece of land, the Minisink Flats. But I was mistaken in thinking that so little would be inundated because when the parks took over, the Army Corps of Engineers Real Estate Department took more houses than would ever be taken for the dam. The estimate is that 10,000 people have been put out of their homes, and this is because the law of eminent domain is so easy for the government to use. My viewpoint, and it keeps me going at the times when the going gets tough, is what I'm doing for people 100 years from now.
I elected and chose a career to be a public servant, and it's very satisfying to me to know that I'm preserving something for people for all time, and playing a major role in that. There's certainly no personal gain for me. I won't be here 25 years from now to enjoy the benefits of the park, but I get a great deal of satisfaction in knowing that it's something that is going to be here in perpetuity and a major project that's going to benefit the public
I don't know when this
forever.
is made.
And I'm sure this is the same situation as when the major western parks were first envisioned and grew.
Oh, they're burning it. Yep.
The firefighters are taking a training session today. We'll be here all day until this house is completely down to the ground. The house is part of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and it was slated for demolition. So we gained permission from the Park Service and the EPA to burn it instead of just demolishing it. That way they get rid of the house and we get the benefit of training at the same time.
When's next one? We're Wetmore House on Pike Road.
April drill. What will be here at the end of the day? That slab, and this will be a slab too. That'll be all that's here. And they'll send a bulldozer in to take it away, and this will all be considered as reclaimed ground for the forest.
How often do you do this kind of exercise?
As often as we can get a place to destroy. You know, not many people want to volunteer their homes.
Again, crazy word choice. Okay, this is made past 1980. So this guy did literally.
A lot of people that see us picketing, I think, feel that we are against the park. That is not the situation. That's not the case. We're not against the park. We're against the way that it's been handled and the way that it's been administered.
Even though he has settled and sold his property and taken a retention, I believe it was 25 years that Bill Erdos took, I don't really think that necessarily has changed his opinion. He does not necessarily now support the park simply because he has resigned himself to selling his property.
Birdsall has stated that we have settled. That is completely untrue. We have not settled, we have not signed anything, we have not received any payment whatsoever.
And I'm not trying to be facetious, but what I'm trying to say is a bureaucratic agency has trampled the rights of people illegally.
Well, you're using emotional words like trampled the rights.
What's wrong with emotional words? We're talking about people's homes.
He's so
That's
good.
democracy. You'll never find in any group everybody agreeing. It's inevitable when you do something this big that some people aren't going to want it. This is going to be a job that's done professionally, it's going to be done right, and the interests of the residents here are going to be preserved, and I happen to be one of them myself, so I know exactly what their concerns are.
Exactly what do you want to say by demonstrating it? Right. The organization that's meeting here today is the Cuyahoga Valley Park Association. They've never given us the opportunity to present our side. What they don't say is that the Park Service here is tragically violating both the spirit and the intent of the act that created the National Recreation Area.
The primary thing is that the public interest must be served. And as far as I'm concerned, my personal interest and everyone else's personal interest that lives in this valley is secondary to the public interest.
And you know, fighting the
as far as I'm
area.
The primary thing is that the public interest must be served. And as far as I'm concerned, My personal interest and everyone else's personal interest that lives in this valley is secondary to the public interest.
And you know, fighting the Park Service is like fighting motherhood.
Okay, 731 Echo.
731, 3 Delta 12. I'll be out of the security check of the Rohack property on Mars Road. I would say the difference between a patrol function in a, let's say, a Western National Park and Cuyahoga Valley National Recreational Area is here you are more, I would say, intensely involved in a law enforcement function, checking houses that the Park Service has purchased prior to their being sold and removed. In terms of vandalism of the homes, the problem is ongoing. I don't know how you're going to get around it. We try to get them removed as quickly as possible, but when you're talking about, you know, a fair number of homes, certainly at any one time we have 60 or 70 homes, it's difficult to get rid of homes in this day and time with the price of houses being what they are. Anytime you come into an area that's already established and basically mandated by the U.S. Congress to set up a park with people already living in an area, I don't really think that it's possible not to have a PR problem.
True.
The idea for the series on the Cuyahoga Valley Park came about through our desk and our city editor, who had been in touch with the various community groups who had been protesting what the Park Service had been doing for quite some time. So I was called on to just take a look. And my inclination, both my inclination of myself and my city editor, who were both outdoor types, was that there must be something wrong with the homeowners. You know, this is a noble concept, something that the press, in fact, had been pushing for some years. But I went out and just started looking around. It took about a month, and I just drove from one end of the park to the other, and I became aware that there were indeed a lot of problems, and things just didn't seem right. I went through this little village of Everett, and seeing all these places boarded up with big stickers on there, U.S. government property, keep out, you really begin to wonder, well, why is all this being done? And that's how come we kind of came to concentrate on this
My
question.
glasses are going to be reflective. I'm sorry, but it's just blue light glasses to help me not.
Really,
my
what's
eyes
going
not
on? I don't
be
think
destroyed.
anybody had been objecting to the fact that there was going to be a park. It was just the way that it was being done. In driving around, I had a map of the area and where everything was supposed to be and where everything actually isn't. I just drove up Chaffee Road in Sagamore Hills and said, I wonder what's down here. The rest of the development was untouched, but the three houses at the end were not. And so I knocked on the door and started talking to Mrs. Phillips.
The reason they were going to take these three homes here is because down from the valley, you know, like in the summer or winter months and that.
And I wonder what's down here. I just drove up Chaffee Road in Sagamore Hills and said, I wonder what's down here. The rest of the development was untouched, but the three houses at the end were not. And
because down from the valley, you know, like in the summer or winter months and that there, you could see the houses. And they didn't want anything, you know, shown in the park. So that's when they approached us and they told us that they were going to take these three houses here.
That A-frame that he refers to is visible from down in the valley as an intrusion as you're walking through the valley in the Pinery Narrows and look up. So for those reasons, the trail going there and the visibility, that property was acquired.
Well, I stood on that property and looked down. I couldn't even see the river. And I thought that this was an interesting story. I drove around to the other side of the valley, and on the rim, I couldn't even see the across the other side. Now, this, of course, was March. The trees hadn't yet come out into full flower, full leaf.
Almond something.
And so you could see all the way through, and I couldn't see what they were talking about.
And I think we've done the best job we can under the circumstances, but it's a difficult problem in terms of basically buying up land and
Peter Almond.
Trying to give people a fair price for their land, negotiating it, and then the people leaving. And you're never going to have 100% agreement on people having to leave home sites.
No idea what this says. It's way too overexposed.
Government has acquired your property, and we hadn't had a price. We didn't know what we were getting for it. And then after the verdict, the jury came out with the verdict. I sat there for about 15 minutes, or 5 minutes, I mean, and I sat there, and then I turned to our lawyer, and I said, Lee, let's leave. I just feel empty. That's not just the way we felt. We were empty because we didn't get enough to make ourselves whole, to replace what we have. We just didn't make it.
And how about your daughter? She was there, right?
Yes. She started to cause a scene. She got very upset. She started to cry, and she started to say things. And my husband jumped up real quick. took her out of the courtroom before she could be in contempt of court or before she would be arrested.
Well, I asked the Park Service, I asked Birdsall, do you have a plan? And they produced a master plan, but it wasn't an acquisition plan. It didn't say how they were going to obtain the houses and or any other properties and in what order and why. And from what I could read of the original authorization by Congress, that was definitely required to have an acquisition plan, and I didn't see one.
You want me to tell you something that it's off the record?
What order? It didn't say they produced a master plan, but it wasn't. I asked Birdsall, do you have a plan? And they produced a master plan, but it wasn't an acquisition plan. It didn't say how they were going to obtain the houses and or any other properties and in what order and why. And from what I could read of the original authorization by Congress, that was definitely required to have an acquisition plan, and I didn't see one.
You want me to tell you something that it's off the record? I got Bob vomiting yesterday. He's so nervous and so upset that he's holding his stomach like this, and he doesn't want to move. I mean, it's affecting him more than me. Well, like I said, in the 10-mile area, there's been 6 houses torched, and if I see this house go up and...
Yeah,
and windows broken, or else they take a bulldozer...
They're targeted, and then all of a sudden, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, you hear the sirens go off. And then you know, or you also you hear the sirens, and then you look out and you see a glow in the sky, and you know that one of your neighbor's houses is going up. A lot of them being
That's crazy. Just knowing like
Well,
your neighbor's
we've been here
houses
for
are
30-some years.
abandoned and are being set on fire around you.
Well, we've lived
Kind of
here.
a hellish,
I couldn't do
honestly.
it. That's all there is to it. I wouldn't even go.
That's what Bob said to me yesterday. Or no, last week. I started packing things from the cupboard. And he cussed. He says, gosh darn it, he used different words. He says, we're packing. He says, I'm not going to move. I said, Bob, we have to. He says, well, I'm going to tell the park we're not moving. I said, Bob, we have to. So I just kept on packing.
That's one of the things that, yeah. I don't know, I hate, well, what you're standing in is my ideas.
He built it.
I designed this house and built it.
What
Okay.
memories do you have of this
First
house?
memory, I brought Nellie home from the hospital with a new
Michelle.
baby, which is our youngest, which she was born in April 8th, and that's when we moved into the house. So,
Oh, they're leaving. Oh.
one era is over with, and we're starting a new one. So now we'll start all over again.
Second time around.
Second time around. It's supposed to be the best.
Yes, sir. The true hero.
Thank you, Bob. It's a real privilege to be up here today to tell our
With the
neighbors up
Rotary
here in
Club.
the-
What is the Rotary Club? Is that any way related to like Freemasons? I feel like I associate it in my mind because I feel like I grew up in a place where those buildings were close, but it's not. It's a service organization. Self-declared mission is to provide service to others, promote integrity and advance world understanding, goodwill, and peace through fellowship of business, professional, and community leaders. Interesting. Honestly, sounds like something that'd be like a shady organization, but you know, we don't go there. We
east side of Cleveland, the east side of Cuyahoga County. A little bit more about your national park, the national recreation area that's being developed down the Cuyahoga Valley. Now, from time to time, you read in the newspapers and see on TV controversial issues which are involved in any project such as this, especially in regard to land acquisition.
He's aware of
3 or
it.
4 months after the series had appeared
He's
in the
aware
paper,
of the controversy and what
Birdsall
people
was
dislike about
reassigned.
the way he's doing stuff.
But Birdsall didn't leave the valley. He died, had a heart attack, and died as he was cleaning out his desk, I understand, in August.
Go get him. Go get him, doggy. Sorry. I just found this. Stein Sapir sued Birdsall for libel and slander. Birdsall removed the case to the federal court under the federal officer statute. The Cleveland Press ran a series of articles about the dispute between National Park Service and homeowners in the Cuyahoga Valley National Recreation Area. At the time, Birdsall was superintendent of the recreation area. That's his specific role. His duties include acting as media spokesman for the project. Let's save this here. Stein Sapir. It's formatted Birdsall versus. No, it's that. Birdsall allegedly said that Leonard Stainsapir had attempted to cheat the government and had behaved in an unethical manner. I bet he says it in one of these documentaries. So then Stainsapir sued him. He asserted he was a federal employee and had acted within the scope of his employment and under the color of his office with respect to the allegations of Stainsapir's complaint. So Stainsapir objected to removal and filed a motion to return the case to state court. While the motion was pending, Birdsall died. He filed another action in state court, this time naming Birdsall's administrix as the defendant. Interesting. On balance, we believe this case was properly removed to federal court under the rationale of Morgan and Newcomer. We agreed at the district court that with the district court that Birdsall's petition and accompanying documents demonstrate the necessary causal connection between his statement in the press and his duties as superintendent. We also agreed the district court on the abatement issue. Ohio Revised Code specifically provides that actions for libel or slander abate with the death of either party. Stainsapir contends that his action survives against Birdsall's estate. In our opinion, the Ohio courts have conclusively resolved this question against the appellant, the state, blah blah blah. The Ohio Supreme Court held that a suit for malicious prosecution is not one for injuries to the person and therefore did not survive under section, blah blah blah. And this was in what? An appellate court? Sixth Circuit? His name's Bill Birdsall. William Birdsall. Interesting. His name's in here though, right? 27. Do we have a... They even reference the for the good of all. Oh. This is helpful. Hmm. 908 acres, which is a small portion of it. Reporter Lambest NPS land acquisition on primetime Sunday, focusing on CV, the Cuyahoga Valley, and then Bill Birdsall dies. For the good of all. This is a short version of the For All People, For All Time by Mark and Dangery, which is the one we're watching now. Interesting that they kind of just blow over. Oh, I bet serving and protecting. No, they just kind of like blow over it. There's like stumbles. The special populations. I don't know. It's not the worst name, given history. I'd rather it be special than other words. Interesting. Congressman John F. Sieberling introduces the Ohio Canal and Cuyahoga Valley Recreation Development Act. He promises no land purchase without owner consent and relies on scenic easements. This bill fails to pass. And this is in the House, like the federal House. So he tried to do this one before, and this is important context because it's kind of like, hey, we weren't always trying to do this necessarily the worst way, which... Again, even with the bill that did pass, I think it emphasized easements more than Birdsall carried out under his supervision, the way it was carried out. Timeline of events for CVNP. Second bill, leading hearings. Oh, this is interesting. Oh. NPS Director Ron Walker tells park planners that Cuyahoga Valley will be a park over my dead body. This bill provides easement, not outright land taking, to ease local residents concerned about losing their land. Whirlwind tour. John Sieberling recalls the Congressmen were impressed and the valley had sold itself. It's right here. The Senate passes it. The next day, Senator Taft writes to Gerald Ford to recommend it, requesting a phone call if he wishes to veto it. Then President Gerald Ford receives a briefing memo recommending that he veto the bill to create the CVNRA, because he it's probably one from the Office of Management and Budget, other people advising his administration, like the organizations within his administration that would give him advisement. So veto's drafted. It concludes by saying, I do not believe the Cuyahoga River Valley qualifies as a national recreation area. The present combination of federal assistance and state and local government efforts will strike the appropriate balance for recreational development of the valley. And then it's Taft and Metzenbaum both call Ford, who is on a ski vacation, to advocate for the bill and warn that he will lose Ohio in the upcoming 1976 election if he does not sign it, which he does anyway. And then that same day, he signs it. Press release goes out from Vail, Colorado, this following day. Interesting. And then in 75, they tried to get it a national park, which I think didn't happen until 2000, though, as far as I know. Anyway, let's keep going with this.
I flew in from Cleveland to meet with Dickerson, who is the head of the Park Service in Washington. We're proposing that before facilities are planned and instituted, that they be discussed with representatives of the actual residents, that all condemnations that are presently pending be dismissed, or at least stopped pending a review of the planning procedures that have gone through up to this date. I hope that they can now go forward and look at it from a fair-minded standpoint and work out what should have been worked out in the very beginning. Fair-minded planning of a park which would plan the park around the people, and a commitment to preserve the continuity and the cultural heritage of the community. And I think that they'll agree that what we're proposing is fair, and I think they'll go along with it.
We just had a meeting today, as a matter of fact, with Mr. Stein's peer.
Who is this guy? This guy says.
What he was generally expressing was the kind of concerns that many of the homeowners in the National Recreation have about the future, where they're headed, and the impact of the National Recreation Area project on their lives. And we had an exchange of views, and they have now gone on their way.
My feeling was that this is a large corporation. The Interior Department is a large corporation. He's the executive head of it. They have a subsidiary company in the Cuyahoga Valley where there are a few problems, and he will do what he can to see if there are problems. It was very clinical, devoid of any emotion.
One of the things that's associated with parks is open space, but in establishing a new area, such as a national recreation area where you have residential communities already in place, the question is always how much residential space ought to be allocated and how much open space. And essentially that seems to be the continuing question that's still being debated right now at Cuyahoga.
Look at this house. It's such a waste. When is it all going to stop? I don't know when the Park Service will have enough of these homes and enough of these properties to do what it is they have in mind to do, if they know what it is that they have in mind to do. And I'm not convinced that they have a very clear picture.
First, they tore the barn down. Our neighbor Alexander's told us that they came in with bulldozers and leveled the house right down and covered up the basement. I don't know whether they did anything with a well or not.
We all say the same thing, the older ones especially, that lived there all our lives and generations, that there's just no word to express it, the feeling that it leaves you with. And also that our ancestors aren't here, any of them, to see this happen, because I don't think any of them could have taken it.
At the demonstration at the Peninsula nightclub was the first time that we had heard that the park system had considered that our case was settled. And when the thing about our case being settled came up from Birdsell, we went back and checked and found out that, in fact, our attorneys had sent a letter to the court saying that we'd accepted the deal, lock, stock, and barrel, which was not the case at all. So we now have a new law firm representing us. We have been successful in going back to the court and having the order to vacate the trial reinstated. That's the order to vacate has been voided. So we now have been scheduled for trial late September of this year. So we're really in the same place we were a year ago at this point in time.
Oh, I like to stay here, but you know we can't when they made other plans for us. So I'll go with him. Make myself happy.
Make myself
you
happy.
know, I'll miss the church. I'll miss living here, but have to go. I see I lived here. We come down here in 36, didn't we? 36, Grandma. That's a long time.
Like the flicker there, very seizure-inducing.
It's difficult for me to tell precisely what Bill's vision for the park was. I only met Bill once, and that was about 8 months before he died. We spoke very briefly. I had a brief tour of the park and had some idea of what the resource here was, but he didn't share with me perhaps his deepest thoughts, and there was little time to do that. I only met Bill once, and that was about 8 months before he died. We spoke very briefly. I had a brief tour of the park and had some idea of what the resource here was, but he didn't share with me perhaps his deepest thoughts, and there was little time to do that. My belief, however, and what I can extract from the documentary evidence and the management style and the record generally, is that he envisioned a great, unspoiled 32,000-acre, as I think he chose to put it, tennis shoe wilderness, right here between Cleveland and Akron. And I see my job perhaps more as a broker than the head of a fiefdom.
Yeah, this is the end. This is the end. Yeah, this is the end of the Tonkin in the valley here. They're all gone now, except me and Grandma. They'll tear the old farmhouse down, I imagine. The Greenman over there belonged to my niece, my great niece, her and her husband, and they'll just bulldoze it down. And the barn they'll tear down and burn, I imagine. Or maybe they may sell it. It'll never be moved. It's not that good anymore. That was a new one there, the brown one there. And of course the old one here was Folks's.
How'd you decide where to move?
I just looking for a place more or less wasn't be bothered again. It's out in the country. It's close enough to a medical center to get Grandma to it in case I need to. I'm supposed to move my stock, tools, and cars like that.
I don't share necessarily the view that all business enterprise in a park is bad. Under the previous administration, most of the businesses were bought out, so they no longer exist here.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, on the other hand, we may, in fact, invite businesses here, either through concessions or through other mechanisms. As you know, we now have the authority to rent historic properties for various uses, some of which could be commercial. I think the correctness of permitting commercial use depends on the individual use. A small restaurant or a flower shop doesn't particularly bother me.
This seems like deja vu. We're starting all over again, although this time with a new administration. The last time we were here, we met with Russell Dickerson, who was the head of the Park Service, who committed to us about 9 months ago that he'd get back to us on our specific petitions. We have yet to hear a word from him.
We've seen a easement, whereas over 400 out of the original 500 residences have either been acquired in fee already or are presently in condemnation. What the Park Service is doing now is they're taking homes that were purchased, homes that are worth $40,000, $50,000, $100,000, and they're giving them to the local fire department to burn for practice.
They tried to manage it like Yosemite. Exactly. So you've got an elite cadre in the National Park Service who are trained, who have spent 20 years in managing national parks as natural areas.
You know, there's another factor, too, that nobody mentioned. That is that the Park Service contracted with the Corps of Engineers to perform the acquisitions. The Corps ain't in the habit of going out for easements. They want to flood something.
And the most poignant central fact is that the people did not have to be kicked off their land in order to... Poignant
that's sick.
central
Looks
fact
like
is that the people did not have to be kicked
scholarly
off their land in order to have a wonderful park. They could have stayed.
It's not dead yet.
It is not. It's not dead yet.
It can still be
There are
saved.
three classes of situations. There are the people who are in condemnation right now but have not lost title to their property. Our recommendation would be that those condemnations be dismissed immediately by the government. Number two, there's the classification of people who are living under a scenic easement or a term of years. Our recommendation with respect to those people, and that's well over 100 people. As a matter of fact, Birdsville testified about 172, I believe, in 1979, living under scenic easement or a term of years. Our recommendation with respect to those people is that they be permitted to buy back the interest in their land that they had to give up to the government. In other words, give the government back its money, less some amount to compensate them for the inconvenience, and they get back full fee title to their property.
Well, subject to a scenic easement, however, so they can't commercially develop it.
You mean the homes that are there that have been purchased? Give them back their money and give them their homes.
Exactly.
They'd agree to that.
They'd agree to that, absolutely.
So happy I can't tell you.
That's good. And we spoke with people in authority. We spoke to among others, the Undersecretary of the Interior, the second man in command in the Department of the Interior. And as Tom says, they were sympathetic.
This Stein Sapero, he called me one day and he said, would you be interested in buying your old property back?
I guess
He
they
said,
showed up in like
"We're working on
88, 78.
something now through the government.
They're still
that
holding
the
it here
old
in 81, and they said
homesteaders
40
could buy back
years.
their
So
old
it'd either be
property. I said, well,
77 or
you must have been late.
78.
I said, there's nothing left.
Never heard a word. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Since
Damn.
the euphoria of that meeting, where it appeared as though new people were in power who were sympathetic to our
Oh,
cause.
see,
we've
I
really
thought they
heard
actually
nothing.
ended up getting
The
something.
bureaucracy
I
here
think
has not
they
changed.
maybe get
And
something.
it appears as though the bureaucracy in
That's what
Washington
the other guy said.
is more involved with higher political things than the welfare of a community in the Cuyahoga Valley.
In our reports, we recommend that the Park Service sell back lands to private property owners where they acquired lands inconsistent with the intent of Congress or
Central Accounting Office. U.S. Government. Government of Accountability. What did that report say it was? Let me look up this one if we can. Is that reassessed? Okay, let's just. Oh, literally the Government of Accountability Office. Yeah, they work for Congress. I think they were created by Congress, but they're independent. Can I get a full? Yeah, here we go. Beautiful. That's why I love government reports. As long as they're not redacted, they're usually here for free. Generally follow the practice of acquiring as much land as possible without regard to need and alternatives to purchase unless specially spelled out in the legislation. Consequently, lands have been purchased not essential to achieving project objectives and before planning how the land was to be used and managed. Because of this practice, federal agencies overlooked valuable alternative land protection strategies such as easement, zoning, and other federal regulatory controls, including to dredge and fill permit programs by protecting that. Over 1/3 of all land in the United States government is in the United States is owned by the federal government, within local and state government holding a small but growing share. The federal government has no overall policy on how much land it should protect, own, and acquire. The GOA recommends they establish a policy for federal protection and acquisition of land. I want to quote that one. It's the Forest Service, the Department of Agriculture, and the Fish and Wildlife Service in the national park. Oh, they're listing the Forest Service, Department of Agriculture, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the National Park Service, both under the Department of Interior. Can we fix this?
In our reports, we recommend that the Park Service sell back lands to private property owners where they acquired lands inconsistent with the intent of Congress or where they really weren't needed for the purposes of the area.
We have, they tell me right now, about $3 billion in arrears for the Park Service, of land that the Park Service is supposed to buy. There are well over 100 incomplete parks. When you have that kind of situation, then you've got a real problem.
But a better model for the future is not the Santa Monicas, it's the Pine Barrens, the New Jersey Pine Barrens. That recognized that many land uses can coexist peacefully together, and in fact in a complementary way, that it's much better to have not a sealed gate, but in fact cranberry growers alongside wild and scenic areas, alongside...
True, it's like the preservation of the natural order while not completely disrupting any economic activity there, especially smaller businesses, like local stuff. Obviously, you don't want an Amazon warehouse there, but if you want like a florist or a cranberry, I don't know if it'd be farm, you know.
National Reserve was viewed as an experiment of whether the federal government, in partnership with the state, in partnership with local government, could take the necessary steps to protect an area of such significance without expending massive amounts of federal funds for acquisition. The traditional manner, of course, in an area like this would be to acquire all of the land.
People have to accept coexistence of functions. In complex landscapes, the thing that makes them nice is that there's so many interesting and different things that go on in them.
But there has to be a way, other than taking a pickup truck full of $1,000 bills out somewhere to buy scads of acreage. There has to be a way to protect these landscapes, not to lock them up, but let them keep operating, let them keep functioning as farms or grazing land or whatever they're doing, low-density residential areas even. And don't muck them up, but keep those landscapes intact so that in effect you keep a good place to live intact.
We are tackling something that's very complex. Forest succession is a theory and a practical situation that not everybody agrees on. What I've tried to take is an intelligent, eclectic approach, pooling what makes sense, what applies here in the recreation area, and that's how I came up with the worksheet. This is just an example. It won't hold true in every case. Nature is like people. Every tree is different. And like people, they grow where they like to grow. And sometimes those are odd places.
The party sold their property to the park, retained rights to live there. Their dog killed a groundhog.
And the park ranger came by.
He said, "Is this your dog?" And I said, "Yes."
Oh,
and he said, "Well, he just killed a woodchuck in the corner." And I said, "Well, the farmer that has that little garden down the road, he'll be coming up and thanking me.
They charged the lady with harassing the groundhog or the woodchuck. Not the dog. So, of course, I guess the dog couldn't be.
And said they would have to pay a $15 fine or else go to court.
And I asked him, I said, well, my husband's got a garden out here. You mean if the woodchuck comes in there, any self-respecting woodchuck is going to eat cabbage and lettuce instead of weeds? You mean that we can't do nothing about it? He said no.
I think it's more to get people roiled up, though. Say we were younger, we'd probably say, hell, I'm going to get out of here, you know?
Government planners have recommended the roads be closed. However, their 264-page report says nothing about the 370 families who live within the park, nor does it address the problems they will have getting to their homes or traveling to work if the roads are closed. The plan says the 4 miles of Wheatley Road should be considered for possible removal and the land returned to its natural state. In the Everett area, the government would eliminate all automobile traffic and turn back the clocks to the 1800s. People would have to reach the Boston Township hamlet, once an outpost on the Ohio and Erie Canal, by foot or horseback.
No, I'm done riding horses. I like mine under the hood now. I ain't riding no horses. No way.
Well, our house sits probably 400 feet off of Wheatley Road, and from Wheatley Road to the next accessible road, according to the sketch they had in the Beacon Journal, it's probably close to 2 miles, 2.5 miles. So, in the winter, it could be a little tough. In January of this year, we've settled with the park. In a situation like this, where you're forced to sell against your will, in this park at least, they've had to give the homeowner the right to retain up to a life estate in the property. We've elected to take 10.
Life estate. A life estate is the ownership of a movable property for the duration of a person's life. It is an estate in real property that ends at death, when the property rights may revert to the original owner or the another person. The owner, so basically they get to keep it until they die, and then the government
10 years.
will get it afterward.
So depending on when all these roads get closed, we could be hoofing it for several years, apparently.
Too young. Too young to give up. You give up and sit down in that rocking chair, you'll die. No, I got a lot of things to do yet. A lot of things. You have to have some authority to be.
I feel like that barn is that one that's in the that you see all the time, right? I don't know, maybe.
You have to have some authority, to have a planning and having progress. But they could do it a lot more gently than they did, I think. People, the residents of the valley, and not causing near as much disruption as they have. But I guess they've chased all the riffraff about out now, so they get us out, I guess they can do what they want. I really don't, I don't feel much of anything right now. Just kind of anxious to get moved. It's been a long, hard grind, but I don't think I'm going to, break down or anything. If I can just get her settled there and satisfied, why, I'll be satisfied.
I'm gonna go get a drink. Hello, I know. You doing okay? Okay. I'm going to finish this and then probably take a break. Just got a snack. Put this. Crap. We'll pick that up in a second. Yeah, let's finish this real quick, and then maybe later tonight or tomorrow I'll come and actually start putting together an outline, because I feel like I have a pretty decent idea. I don't know if there's like a huge amount of like chronology required for this story, besides just like the basic events of that, and then mixing in the local legends. But yeah, I wanted to watch through all this just to get a good idea of this side of it.
Looking for a sunset bird in winter. The west was getting out of gold. The breath of air had died of cold. When shooing home across the white, I thought I saw a bird alight. No bird was singing in it now. A single leaf was on a bough. That was all there was to see in going twice around the tree. From my advantage on a hill, I judged that such a crystal chill was only adding frost to snow. A brush had left a crooked stroke on what was either cloud or smoke. From north to south across the blue, a piercing little star was through. Okay, so let us take a walk toward the cross-country cross-country. I'm all choked up. We're going that way, all right.
Before its creation. Our family, along with 50 others, or approximately all that is left, our school is now gone. Our library is struggling and will not survive. Our tax base has been decimated. Our community and way of life has been destroyed at great human cost.
Because of the creation of the park.
Yes, at great financial cost, and most tragically, to no good purpose, all in the name of preservation. Practically without exception, everyone in the valley was in favor of the creation of the recreation area because we knew that eventually developmental expansion would take its toll. However, both our community and Congress were told that an act had been structured that would preserve our homes and community by means of preservation easements, and that the remaining open space areas would be purchased in fee. But now, over 425 out of the original 500 homes in the original park boundaries have been bought out by the government. The tragedy of the Cuyahoga Valley has consistently been justified by its proponents as a great victory for all people, for all time. But I implore you to be suspect of those individuals who are ready to sacrifice the rights of individuals, families, and communities for general concepts of the public good with no responsibility of a burden of proof. We're fighting this battle, we feel, for all of us, because if we lose this lonely battle, we feel that we will all be the less for it.
Well, there used to be farms on all sides of us, actually. There was a farm over there and a beautiful old barn sat right behind that row of Shumacs that the Corps of Engineers knocked down in 1976. On the other side of us was another farm with a number of nice outbuildings that the Corps knocked down the following year, 1977. So the area looks somewhat desolate now, but at one point it was a thriving agricultural community. I'm a professor of environmental economics at Fordham University. I was involved with the effort to stop the Tox Dam. I came in 1974, and we worked on that for 4 years, and were finally able to protect the river by getting a scenic river designation. Unfortunately, while we thought we were also protecting the valley residents, it turns out that the Park Service has a different interpretation of that act than we do. Between the Corps of Engineers and the Park Service, over 9,000 properties have been acquired now, and there are about 70 year-round homes left here. And we're going to court on April 29th in the last-ditch attempt to try and have this eviction policy stopped.
Well, the experience in the United States of the relationship between man and the land has historically been one of exploitation and a certain sense of embarrassment or shame about that exploitation of the land. And my own view is that the parks movement in America has been dominated by that experience. And for that reason, American parks are perceived as places where nature exists in the absence of man.
There was an old farmhouse here at one time, but the Park Service historian said that only this one room was architecturally significant, so they tore the rest of it down and left that standing here. Park Service is trying to institute a policy of making a number of these old structures what they call discovery sites, which is a euphemism for letting them fall apart. The idea is that when people 50 or 100 years from now come hiking through the woods,
they'll come across a building like this and they will be able to discover it.
The American experience has been one that has led us to believe that relations between people and nature cannot be, perhaps never will be, harmonious. But that, of course, is quite different from the European experience, in which people, rural people, lived with nature, been a part of nature, and been perceived as harmoniously interacting with nature.
Ever since the deadline, the last deadline on the eviction, Senator Bradley's office has been trying to get the Park Service to relent. And I was phoned this morning by Senator Bradley's office, and they gave me a list of 12 residences that the Park Service said they would allow to remain if the owners brought the properties up to their standards at their own, that is, at the owner's expense. And this is one of the structures that they are allowing to be renovated and brought up to standard. Of course, this guy, the owner of this property, was afraid of losing everything he had if he didn't meet the March 1st deadline, and took his place apart, took whatever beams he could salvage with him. And now the Park Service comes back and says that he can stay. It's somewhat ironic.
If one now looks at places like the French regional parks, of which there are some 20 scattered over the landscape, one sees an entirely different kind of nature, nature with people in it. That is something, of course, that American park managers have very little experience with, and I'm sorry to say, I think very little patience with. While I admire greatly American park managers in many respects, I think they have neither the experience nor the patience nor the interest in dealing with people. They tend to see people as a nuisance.
It's a bit harsh, but...
Thursday is a big day for us seasonal dwellers because we are hoping that the federal judge will decide to assign a continuing restraint order so that the National Park Service cannot evict us. We think that we should be given the right to remain here and live out our lives here. After all, we've been coming here. We, my husband and I, since 1935.
It would be very hard for us to replace what we've had. We worked hard for it, and we just don't want to see it torn down. If we're being used, if the area were being used, any part, we'll go along with 100%. But as it is, there's no formal plan, and it's simply a question to say, we're going to bulldoze your place down no matter what. You're not going to stop us, and that's it. Amen. That seems to be what we hear.
We feel we're great contributors to the area, that we have cherished the land for a long, long time, and we have not harmed the land, and that we can cooperate with the Park Service and be a benefit to them in their programs as long as we can stay here.
What's your prediction now? What do you think is going to happen? I think we're going to I think we're going to be happy with the judge's ruling. That's the way I feel, very seriously. What's the best that could happen? Well, beautiful long-range lease involving my wife and I as long as we are living. I would hope for that.
Well, the judge gave everyone until May 10th to remove anything. Yeah.
Damn.
Right, through the end of next weekend.
You get 1 week.
Senator Bradley's going to see Ray Arnett, who's the assistant secretary, on Wednesday, and maybe he'll be able to talk some sense into him.
We were stunned, absolutely stunned. We just sat there and looked at each other and couldn't believe what we had heard.
It's the same couple, yeah.
This is about all I could find left of the Thompsons' cabin, which was bulldozed about, well, I guess it was the day after the court deadline. I was very surprised at how quick they moved. Senator Bradley's office throughout this whole period was negotiating with people in Washington, trying to stop the bulldozing of these cabins until we could work out a reasonable solution. Yet the local superintendent just went ahead and knocked down everything. This one isn't even
Cuyahoga, though, right? This is Delaware. This is the water gap.
All right, here you go. Look at this. Look at this. Stop Park Service eviction. Save the Delaware 142. I think it's lovely, isn't it? Well, this is the remains of 100 cabins right here in the middle of the National Recreation Area. It's part of their rat breeding program. This looks like this could have been off of Jesse and Alan's cabin, Redwood. It's just incredible. This is an agency that's supposed to be concerned with the physical environment. Look at this shit. The river is just behind the stand of trees here. I mean, this crap's going to leach right into the river.
It's a beautiful picnic area, no question about it. But there was a home here. We
Oh,
never
that'd
see
be so
anyone using
surreal.
it. Why did the home have to go out of 32,000 acres? And it's inconceivable to me that Congress could specify in the enabling legislation that this community was to be allowed to remain here, and that this was ignored.
We did a survey. We contacted about 236 people. And based upon that survey, 77% of those people didn't think that their property would have been acquired in the park. And as it turns out, you have less than 1% of the people's property being acquired in scenic easement. For all intended purposes, almost 99% of the park is going to be acquired in fee simple. And based upon that survey, 77% of those people didn't think that their property would have been acquired in the park. And as it turns out, you have less than 1% of the people's property being acquired in scenic easement. For all intended purposes, almost 99% of the park is going to be acquired in fee simple.
You have a beautiful home, and we love it.
You have people didn't think that their property would have been acquired in the park. And as it turns out, you have less than 1% of the people's property being acquired in scenic easement. For all intended purposes, almost 99% of the park is going to be acquired in fee simple.
It was just something that belonged to you, something you wanted to... What do you think? 100 cats?
Fine.
But on the other hand,
For all intended purposes, almost 99% of the park is going to be acquired in fee simple.
you have a beautiful home, and we love it, but it's just not like the valley. But on the other hand, I wouldn't want to be back there if I could go back, because it's just not the same.
They claimed they were going to beautify the park, and destroying landmarks has been there for way over 100 years. It hurts. I spent a lot of hours, a lot of hard work, had them come along and tear it down. It was all you could take.
Oh, that's really sad.
The tradition in the United States with the natural wilderness parks in the West has always been to buy out private interests and to get rid of, quote, intrusions. Now, in recent years, of course, we've begun to establish parks in areas that are inhabited and that have existing and traditional communities in them. Now, in the West, when you get rid of these intrusions, you do it in the name of authenticity. On the other hand, when you have an existing community of people who are part of that region and you get rid of them, you destroy authenticity, because the people and the place together are the authentic scene. And I think myself that one of the problems with American park management is that we've had trouble distinguishing between these two kinds of places, those in which the natural scene and the wilderness is the real place that was never inhabited, and places that have been inhabited and have been settled, and in which the people and the culture are a part of the reality.
We've been in condemnation for approximately 4 years now, and there still hasn't been any resolution of the issue. With hindsight, I can now see that a lot of the problems that were involved here were really because the Park Service has a bureaucratic mindset that people are inconsistent with the environment. They have, with this mindset, destroyed the very things that they were directed to protect. And that's the crazy part about the whole thing.
We stopped filming in the valley in December of 1982. The Lindley family property on Scobie Road remains as open space, and the ground is reverting to forest. Mr. and Mrs. Lindley purchased a farm near Hudson, Ohio, and he still works the land. Since the day they moved, they have never been back to the valley.
Yeah, that's fair.
Bob and Natalie's home, next to their flower shop where we filmed their moving day, was purchased from the government by a developer and moved 2 miles up the road. It was attached to another building and will be sold as a house with a shop. The Volkanoffs built a home outside the valley and moved their flower shop to a mall in Akron. After 4 years in federal court, Leonard and Lorelei Stein-Sapir's home was acquired by the government on Christmas Eve of 1982. The Park Service plans to use their home as an environmental center. Leonard continues to fight the government's action through a lawsuit, which he vows to take to the Supreme Court. He has no intention of ever permitting the Park Service to occupy his home. The Erdos home is owned by the government, and the Park Service plans to use it as an interpretive center where rangers will give nature programs. Bill Erdos and his family will leave the valley. They've purchased land near Wooster, Ohio, and Bill is once again formulating a 10-year plan of projects to improve his land. The Tonkin property in the valley is slated for demolition. We visited Burl at his new place, 150 miles south
Not the
of Cuyahoga
A-frame,
Valley,
no.
in the hills of southern Ohio. He had supervised the construction of a home, a barn, and a pond. He does welding and repairs automobiles and farm machinery, as he did in the valley. Mrs. Tonkin is in good health, and she celebrated her 90th birthday in their new home. In the Cuyahoga Valley, the National Park Service is moving its headquarters to the acquired town of Jate. The original Park Service headquarters, here on Route 303, will be obliterated, and the land will be turned into a picnic area. The village of Everett remains boarded up.
Good doc. lot to think about. Let's see. This one is there. I'm trying to think what other stuff I need to go through. I feel like for later tonight or tomorrow, I want to write out the legends. And then be like, I think the structure I'm going to go with is going to be legends. And then you'll be like, okay, let's go through each of these and tell the truth of this. And then be like, well, why is there all this folklore around this place? Why are there abandoned houses? Why is there this dump that has this thing here that the government found out had to clean up? And then go into this story. In this story, I feel like I want to keep detail, but not necessarily need to go into like specific figures besides like Birdsell, maybe Steinberg Sapir, a little bit with Gerald Ford, just like a sentence or two being like, those two guys convinced him to do it because they said he needed to win an election. And then just go through like the process of how they bought a bunch of the land, forced people to move, give us some examples of people who had those, like were treated badly. And then the aftermath with the report by the GAO. And then just kind of like going through like how it took years and years for stuff to be developed. So, but yeah, I'm going to head out for now, but I'll be back either tonight or tomorrow. Peace.